The other day, I was talking to an executive and he said to me, Matthew, we don't have a finance function in our organization. We've got an accounting function. That stuck with me. But let me show you what he meant. An accounting function is accurate, it's timely, it's compliant, but by its nature, it's backwards looking. A finance function, on the other hand, is commercial, it's influential, shapes decisions, and by its nature, it's future focused. So if you and your team are spending more time on the accounting side and you want to be more influential, you need to be shifting your efforts and time from the accounting stuff to the finance things. But that requires capacity to be able to do that. Now, look, most organizations, they have an accounting function, but they just happen to call it finance. So this represents a real opportunity if finance can free up the time to be able to work on the stuff that's going to create more value for the organization. Let me show you what I mean. In 2016, Wells Fargo, which was founded in 1852 during the Californian Gold Rush, and has been well-established major bank in the US, was fined $3.5 billion due to millions of fake bank accounts being opened up. These were accounts that were created for people who are deceased, people who'd never asked for them. All of the information sat in reports and sat in dashboards. But the thing was that those reports and the dashboards did not change the behavior of the organization. Dozens of senior executives lost their jobs, of their reputations in ruins. They never had criminal records in the past. They didn't set out to do the right thing. It's just that the incentives and the reporting drove the wrong behavior. We need to be, if we're going to be influential, we need to be changing that conversation as finance professionals. The other thing I see quite often is right now we've got the World Cup going on. And you'll often see the coach standing at the sidelines, waving at the players, shouting instructions, giving encouragement, and generally being the number one supporter. But in all the games I've seen, and in all the sporting events I've ever been to, I've never seen the coach run onto the pitch, take the ball off one of the players, go storming down the pitch, tackling the defenders from the other side and scoring a goal. Because it's not in the rules and it's not what the coach does. The coach knows their job and the players know their job. Yet in organizations, finance dive into the pitch all the time. They go in order to be able to save the organization from itself. There's lots of heroic effort that goes on. And that heroic effort is great. But in reality, finance should be acting as the coach on many occasions and providing advice about what the players, as in the senior leaders, should do. So why does all this keep happening? I've spent quite a bit of time over the last few months looking at the reasons. And I believe that the 7 key reasons that come up. And those are Leaders don't know that finance can help because they spend all their time just answering queries from finance and don't think of them as a service function. Secondly, finance is often too busy doing finance work, budgets, forecasts, year end, that it doesn't have the opportunity to be able to provide proactive support. Thirdly, finance leaders are rarely taught how to have strategic thinking. Generalists versus specialists. Finance often recruits generalists when specialists would be more effective. For example, many organizations of a certain size have finance business partners. They all do similar roles, but in very slightly different ways, supporting divisions or business units. If they have common activities that are required, so pricing, managing costs, business cases, etc., having business partners with specialisms in those areas mean that resources can be allocated to having the right person to do the right thing at the right time. One of the other things that I see is that the finance reports are just too hard to understand. And one of the other things is that finance is often answering the wrong question. And finally, point 7 is that finance is set up for compliance. It's not set up as an organization or design to create influence. So who am I? I'm Matthew Needham. I'm a Brit by birth. I've been a CFO in the UK, New Zealand, and Australia. I now work with organizations to help them drive more performance within their organization through better financial conversations. So that means I work with CFOs and their finance teams to be more influential and senior leaders to improve their commercial conversations. I work with a number of CFOs to help them build high-performing finance functions, and I work with a number of senior leaders to help them be more effective in prioritization. The first point I'd like to talk about, I'm going to do a deep dive on 2 of those items from that previous 7, is that finance spends lots of time answering questions. But often they're answering the wrong question. Let me give you an example. Say if you're staying in a fancy hotel and the fancy hotel has a concierge, and you go to the concierge, you ask for tickets for the theatre, you ask for directions to the park or the zoo or whatever, and the concierge provides you with that information. And then you're on your merry way, and they're on to serving the next person in the queue. Contrast that with going to the doctor. If you said to the doctor, "Doctor, I've got a headache," they would not just say to you, "Hey Matthew, there's a prescription, go and get yourself some painkillers." Or maybe some might, but they'd be the very poor doctors. The good doctor would be saying, "Well, how long have you had the headache? How are you eating? How are you sleeping? Are you drinking enough water?" And they would look at a whole range of things, keep asking questions to improve their understanding. And then, only once they've got those decisions, those answers, will they provide the information to you in terms of an action plan. And then the next level, level 3 support, would be very much having a follow-up action plan. So I'll check in with you next week, Mr. Needham. So that explains the difference between a doctor and a concierge. So to be an influential finance professional, you need to be thinking more about being a doctor and not as a concierge. There's different types of questions that can be asked. And research by the Harvard University found that a number of organizations or specific roles, such as doctors, lawyers, journalists, were taught how to ask questions. But executives, and we'll include finance professionals in that, rarely were. But what they found is by asking questions, questions build trust, they improve learning, and they drive insight. But most importantly, they build rapport, and rapport builds trust. People would like to work with people that they know or feel that understand them. So this question pyramid basically shows you how the different types of questions, informational questions, the questions we get all the time. How much is the budget for travel? How much have we spent on contractors? How much have we got left in the budget? All of those particular routine sorts of questions. And most of the answers we are providing is that level. If we were being more of a doctor in our approach, we would ask clarifying questions. Or what's driving this question? What are you trying to achieve here? And by understanding that, you can inform your answer. And of course, by asking insightful questions, so we've just covered the informational, the transactional questions. The transactional questions are very much about the what's happening. The insightful question is, what is driving that? And then the transformational question would be, what if we did something different? Could we achieve the same result? So that expands the thinking. And this is a real opportunity for finance professionals to create influence within their organization by asking a different set of questions. I was talking to a chief operating officer the other day, and the chief operating officer said to me, hey, I've had this problem with finance for the last couple of years that I'm constantly having to rewrite or severely edit a number of the reports that come out going to the board. For example, our latest report was around insurance. And the insurance report went to the board, but was going to go to the board. But the finance team had explained the process that they'd been through. But when you think about what the board actually wanted, the board really wanted the question of how much do we have budgeted? Is this in line with budget? Does our risk change as a result of this new policy? So by understanding the question that's being asked really changes the information that you're able to give, and consequently that reduces everybody's work and helps make the decisions move much faster. One of the key things that we can do as finance professionals is really reduce the amount of, because time is always short, is reduce the amount of rework. So if we spend more time up front asking the question that needs to be, to clarify what the requirements are, then we can actually do a much better job first time round and reduce a whole load of frustration for everybody else. So the key thing I always say to the leaders that I work with is, what is the question behind the question? The second reason that finance teams struggle to influence is the example that I was talking about, that senior leaders find finance reports really hard to understand. It's not so much that they find it hard to understand, they understand the principles. But what they don't understand is what they're expected to do with it. And when you've got a sea of numbers with no real clarity, it's very hard for them to see. Let me explain. Think about the last report that you have produced. It will have work in these following areas. So, what? And you'll invariably see lots of information about what happened. the example I've just shown you, that had a lot of what? A lot of information, graphs, numbers, variances, etc. Often there's very little in the so what, which is typically, what does this mean? So what's the implications of it? The reason I'm telling you this is what. And then what they all seem to be missing is now what. So what it is, why it matters, and what should we do with it. If you think about your reports, go back and spend some time looking through them, and then just answer the question to yourself, is where is most of the effort going? Is it in the what or the so what? I was talking to a chief operating officer in a different organization, and she was saying to me that in their organization, she had a $30 million budget and had a great relationship with their finance business partner. Finance business partner was really great at building relationships, answered questions, really, really helpful. And she does great reports explaining a $3,000 variance. But she said, what good is that to me when I've got a $30 million budget? It's not going to really change anything, any outcomes. So really you need to be thinking about what it is, the information that can be provided. My clients I work with, I show them this template, and which I call the from report to decision. And you can find links to this report, get your own download of it in the links below, in the resources below, and no opt-in required. But basically what it is this is from report to decision. So for everything that you are producing, think about your big variances. What happened? What's the key metric, variance or insight? Write it in a sentence. Keep it light. Keep it clear. What is the metric or the insight you're actually identifying? You don't need to do this for every variance, and that's the whole point. Is that it forces you to be selective in terms of what you're thinking about. Think about what's driving it. What are the key drivers behind that outcome, and list the top 2 or 3. And then thinking about what does it mean, and then think about what do you actually recommend. Most of the finance folks that I have worked with over the last few months have really come from the fact is, well, their starting point is their recommendations really vague. You need to stop spending so much money. You need to drive more revenue. You need to increase occupancy. All of those sort of things. Now, on the face of it, yeah, they're very superficial points, and we really need to get into the specifics of what the leader needs to do, because they're time poor as well. So if you're making them think too much, they're going to have to put something onto one side and come back to it at another time. And I just want to give you an example of, just say that you, again, went to the doctors. But this time you went for a set of blood tests. And the blood tests had come back, and the doctor's got the report in front of them with all the numbers on, something's up, something's down, blah, 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 something's this. And they handed you the report. And they say, off you go, see you in a fortnight. You would be really frustrated in terms of, well, what do they mean by this? What am I supposed to do? And the doctor would never give you just the blood tests. But finance do this all the time with the finance reports. We need to be explaining what it is. I mean, certainly my doctor said, oh, you don't need to worry about this. You don't need to worry about this. We need to do something about this one. Take these pills, do this exercise, eat less, or change your food, blah, 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 whatever. The mistake that most folks make is that when they feel that leaders don't understand their finance reports, it's because they don't lack a financial awareness. I don't believe that is the case at all. I think that all the senior leaders that I've come across, in my career do understand the principles of the finance reports. They just don't understand what they need to do with that report. And by sending senior leaders or any leader on, or budget holder on a financial awareness course, or finance basics, or whatever you want to call it, finance for non-financial managers, all that's doing is increasing the training skill, but it's not changing the behavior. And really, to be influential, we need to be changing behaviors. And look, it's not just me who thinks a lot of this. The research by Accounting and Business Research, which is a professional journal and academic journal, found that studies found that executives describe reporting and is degenerating, is the actual word that they used, and is ever more broad, becoming compliance exercise rather than information for the reader. So this is a real opportunity as a finance professional to really make a massive difference here. So the final point I just want to cover off is that all the reasons, or the two reasons we've just talked about, they all point to the same thing. That finance is designed around compliance, not influence. And so that therefore that means that it's not a training gap or a effort gap that the finance teams aren't putting in enough. It's the design. Finance teams are designed to be compliant, to get those reports into the ATO or the IRD and submit all of the board reports on time, all of those tick box things. They all need to be done, absolutely, but this is a real opportunity to use that time to be more effective, to help shape the decisions of the organization. In the links below, you will find links to the 7 Reasons report, no opt-in required. Also, you will get a template, or I've just showed you from report to decision, and that you can really use to enhance your own reports. But if you want to explore this further, I run a workshop, a half-day workshop, can be delivered in person or online, and that is really to unpack how the finance influence works in your organization and identify where the gaps are, but more importantly, the specific actions of what we need to do to actually fix that. And over a 90-day period, you've got your action plan that you can carry on and do that, or I can help support you to deliver it. So you understand where your team sits and how to close that gap. So if you want to find out more, please feel free to scan the link below, and it'll take you to some more information. Thank you for your time today. Goodbye.